Good morning, everybody. This is Paul Cramey. I'm speaking to you today from the mountains in Colorado. I'm out here for a few weeks vacation. Today's session is the first of a two-part series. You should be seeing the agenda. Excuse me. You should be seeing the agenda on the screen. Today, we're going to be pretty much strictly staying inside of control and talking about the managing your business with statuses and stations, learning about the life cycle of estimates and orders, looking at what kinds of statuses affect the finances of your business, and then lastly, talking about the workflow concepts within control. Then on Thursday, we're going to take that one step deeper down into the mobile production app, and we'll be looking at some of just the basic background information that I think is necessary as a prerequisite for talking about that capability. And then the bulk of the session will be in that item B. We're learning about the mobile production cloud app, the concepts and features, and there are several different things in jobs, boards, and things of that nature that we'll be talking about. And then on Thursday, we'll wrap up with just a brief update on what the usage levels are for the mobile production app and the associated costs of that. Now there is a handout that's posted on the GoToWebinar site down at the bottom. I would suggest that you download that at your convenience. I will be referencing that a couple of times today. One in the context of estimates, and the other in the context of orders. Now I'm trying to manipulate a screen here so I can flip over to the GoToWebinar. Hang on a second, I can operate it on a much smaller screen. Okay, there it is. I'm going to be flipping over to control here for just a second. Apologize for this on a small screen. It's hard for me to have everything up where I can see it at one time. Now I lost my damn GoTo.
Paul, it's Paula.
Yeah.
Hi, hi, I'm sorry I was late. While you're doing that, I just wanted to point out to everyone, and I may have missed it, but there is a chat box at the bottom. And as Paul goes through, if you'll post your questions there, he'll be able to answer them at the end of the web if there's time.
Okay, I'm going to try to talk, and I'm having trouble getting back to where I had control open.
We do see the control screen, but it's very small.
Is it low at the bottom of the screen?
Well, it's very small. It's only, just showing the very top portion of control.
Let me close down the control. Then I'm going to reopen it here. While I'm doing that, I'm going to try to talk at the same time. Here, let me move this over. I'm used to a 30. Okay, is everybody seeing control now?
Yes, we can, Paul.
Okay,
Everything
I'm
looks
sorry.
fine.
Okay, just a couple of things that I wanted to cover before we really get into looking at some of the things relevant to statuses and stations in control. I want to just go through a couple things. First, just try to establish a definition of what we mean, or what I mean and alluding to when I talk about a life cycle of an estimate or of an order. Think of it this way: an estimate, both estimates and orders, when you create them, they go through multiple processing steps from start to finish. And likewise, estimates and orders have a period of time. So there's a time period that's involved with creating an estimate. There's a time period created in resulting in creating of an order. Now that start to finish time period is what I'm alluding to when I talk about a life cycle. Now, typical life cycle perhaps of an estimate is relatively short. It might be as few as a few minutes, and it could take a day or more. You may work on it multiple days. An order, on the other hand, is considerably more complex. There'll be more involved in creating that order. So it could conceivably be as an hour or less, or up to several days, perhaps even a week or more. So each of them have a different kind of a time, start time, finish time, therefore a different elapsed time. And it's the life cycle then is that time period from T0 when it begins to the T end when it's finished. Now, what are the typical steps that are needed to create an estimate? That's relatively straightforward. You receive a request from the customer, for a quote on a project. You might be, and these are a couple of things that I'm going to comment on are just my perception of some of the process steps that you may go through. You may find a slightly different approach, but the same concepts apply. So you might create what I'm going to refer to as a template estimate, just a very basic, maybe one line in it, if much of anything. Then you're going to begin to work with that client, and you're going to gather the project requirements, all of the things that are going to be involved in that project. So you're going to incorporate those now into the main, into what I'm going to call a main template of an estimate, and populate all the line items with everything that's going to be involved in that project. Then you're going to review that as a fourth step. You're going to review those requirements and the actual estimate proposal with the customer, and hopefully they're going to give you a go decision. Perhaps they'll give you a no-go decision, or it might be that they're going to have to wait for a period of time before they can either say yes or going to say no. Then hopefully you're going to get into the final disposition side of the estimate, and hopefully that's going to be to convert it to an order. They may say no, they're not going to proceed with the project. So then the final disposition of that estimate is going to be that you lost it, or that the customer just continuously failed to respond to follow up initiatives on your side, and you're going to, in that case, probably mark the estimate is voided, and there might be an appropriate reason. Now, on the side of an order, some of the processes are the same, but these are going to be more in the context of the different statuses that are involved with orders. So just like with an estimate, you're going to perhaps receive a request from a customer for an order. That request, in essence, could come as a result of the conversion, and we'll see what that interaction looks like in a bit. So now you're going to create the initial order, and it's going to be in the WIP process, work in process. Now there may be many steps involved incremental steps involved with that project while it's in work in process. You would be gathering the requirements, you'd review them with the customer, and once everything is cool, then the actual work would begin. During the period of time when you're in that WIP or built status, it's conceivable that the order could be voided, and that will bring it to the end of its life cycle. While you're in the built status, for example, you might be waiting for some installation work to be done. You may be waiting for some service work to be done. You may be preparing some packaging for, for shipping or delivery. Then when it hits the sale process side, that's where there may be steps to say that the shipping or delivery was actually done. The installation was actually completed. And it's at this stage that the financial triggers really occur. There's minimal financial impact while it's in WIP, and that's only in the case where there is has been a payment received. But once you hit the sales status, then all of the financial impact takes place, and then the life cycle is going to come to an end when it goes to a closed status. There may be a couple of things that are going to get involved there, but again, all of the financial side is done. Now, how are the life cycles and estimates and stuff like that managed in control? Well, they're obviously managed by both for estimates and for orders. They're both managed by statuses that are predefined in the system. And then there are stations, and think of the stations as incremental steps within a given status. And we'll look at those a little bit more deeply. And then obviously estimates estimates and orders have a completely different set of statuses in stations. Statuses, as I said, reflect, using my language, major milestones of the life cycle as you're walking it through. And the stations on the other side, as I think I mentioned, I think of those as incremental steps within a given major step. Now I'm going to slip over to control. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to try to stop 2 or 3 times to see if we have any questions. So let's stop here, just see if there's any initial ones before I continue on.
Yes, we do have a question, and it's from our first question is from Margaret. And Margaret, I'll unmute you. And the question is, are you creating anything in control? I just see the dashboard.
Were you just going over the sheets, or were you working in control?
I'm going to be shifting to control right now and show some things in control. Okay.
Okay.
First part was just some background context that I wanted to establish.
I got you. I just want to make sure I was seeing what I needed to see.
Nope, you were seeing what you should have been. Okay.
Thank you.
How do you set up and edit?
We have another question. We have another question, Paul.
Okay.
And that is from Tom. Can you add or change statuses? And I've unmuted you, Tom, if you wanted to elaborate.
No, I mean, there's a limited number set up. Can you change the names, or can you add more?
To my knowledge, Tom, the answer to statuses is no, that they are fixed in the system. Linda, I would.
That's correct. That's correct.
But the stations can be, they're completely up to you as far as using the existing ones that are in the system or defining your own.
The one thing I'll say about stations, because we use stations a lot, is that the shorter station names show up better on dashboards than longer station names. Longer names are because they give you more info, but when you're trying to set up dashboards, the shorter names. The other thing is, I caution people to just think about it a lot before you set it up, because you can't change the station and have it ripple through, history, and also, plan out what you're going to do and before you set them all up.
Excellent comments, Tom. Thanks. I'm going to be going through here in just a second the actual process that you might want to do in setting up your own stations if you have some unique ones that you want to create. So I hope I'll just reinforce what Tom shared with us. So if we go to look at the data or stations, I'm going to go up to production, and then I'm going to go to production setup. And over on the left-hand side is stations, okay? Now, notice there's a big long list here. And down at the very bottom, it says show inactive ones. So what you're seeing, if I were to start to expand all of these departments, what are called departments, you would see that some of them are active and some of them might be inactive. So what I'm going to comment on, I'm going to start and comment on some of the use of these particular items in the second column, and then I'll flip over and for the different ones, the department or a sub-level, then we'll look at some of the actual content over here on the right, okay? So the new department allows you to create a new, think of it as a high level station, okay? And that process, you create the name. When you do that, you just hit the new department number, and it's going to bring up the item. It looks like this one, and you're going to enter the name. Here on the check mark stuff, well, let me just back up, and I'm not going to go there quite yet. I'm going to just stick to this. So this is the high level creation. This is a sub-level creation or an incremental step within the department, or it could be an incremental step within another sub-level or incremental step. So think of it as a stair step down, starting at the department level to the first sub-level, and then you could conceivably go to a second or even a third sub-level, okay? Reconfigure is a means of rearranging. You can move items up or down. The checkbox at the bottom, if you remove it, then it will disable and you're not going to see any that are inactive. Now I'm going to choose the new department as if we're going down that path. These steps here are quite important. The name is the name that you want to give to this high level department. Okay, so you can see some of these names that have already been created are pending, in design, in printing, and stuff like that. So just you give it the name. Now, these next few items are very, very important. This says that when you choose all of these or one or the other of these, or a combination of a couple of them, that says that this particular department station is going to apply to orders or service tickets if you have one or more of these or the high level one checked. This checkbox says that this high level department is going to apply to estimates. This says that this department or this name is going to apply to line items within an order, okay? And this says that it's going to be subject to use of the time clock. Now, if I come down one more level, hang on a second, just down here at the bottom, the last two items to comment on are the production terminal and the production cloud app. So if you're planning or are using the production cloud app and you want to be able to use this department station in that mobile app, then you have to make sure that this production cloud app box is checked. We'll cover that in considerably more detail on Thursday. Okay. Now, taking it one step deeper, let's cancel this one and come in as if we're going to create a substation. So here now you're giving the name of this sub-level station and what it is a station of. So this one is a station of pending whatever the name is that we might put in here. Okay, so if you put in ABC and say it's a substation of, and you can choose what that substation is, then it's going to be associated with that, in this case, with that department. Same concept. You got the same choices to make here relative to if it applies to orders and service tickets, if it applies to estimates, line items, time clock, and production app. Now, if you were to do this again, let's find an existing sub-level. Okay, here we're down 3 layers, as you can see. So this is the department, this is the sub-level station, and this is a sub-level station of the one above it. Now, Tom, I think this might allude to some of your thoughts. The more brief each of these names are, at the department level or at the sub level, and even at this level, the better off you're going to be. Because when you're at this final level like this, the full name that I'm pointing to up here at the very top on the right hand side is a concatenation of the department and the sub-level and the name that you want for this particular item or a substation. So it's taking the pending, and then it's taking it's taking the pending code, and then this long name that you entered here. So it's taking it several levels deep, and those names can get pretty lengthy. So the more brief the individual names are, I think would be helpful. Now I am going to switch to this is a copy of the handout, and there's about 3 pages to this. And if I bring that down a little bit, you can see it a little better. I apologize, this is somewhat on the small side. This page is intended to represent the life cycle related to estimates. So I'm beginning over here on the top left. This represents times 0 of beginning the life, where you're getting the request from the customer. This second step, you're creating what I referred to as the estimate template, and it's in pending status, and it might have a status or a station that says that this is in queue. It's in queue to be worked on further. The third step is you're coming from left to right. You're gathering the requirements from the customer, and you're updating the main estimate. And it may have a station that the work of gathering is actually in progress. You could have conceivably had another one in here that it's complete. The fourth one is that you're now reviewing that with the customer. And it could be that you're waiting for approval from the customer. You could say that it's a cold prospect, it's a hot prospect, or it's a kind of a lukewarm prospect. So again, it's intended to convey where it is in that review process with the customer. And this would likely change. You are going to start it off where you're just waiting for approval. And after a while, you may have to come back and say, this is going to be, it's not real certain that it's going to happen. So you may change it to a cold or hot or warm. And there may be others that you would, these are just samples. I want you to understand, these are just samples of my view of what some of the processes might entail. Then as you're coming over to the end of the finals, the last steps of an estimate, now it's going to hopefully be converted, and then likely you would retain whatever the last station was while you were waiting for the conversion to take place. So that would be one of the end points for an estimate. A second possibility would be that you're going to deliberately mark it voided. Customer wasn't responding. You lost it to a competitor. The price was too high, or the project was canceled. Similarly, you could mark it as lost, again, with a reason. These they're used as stations, but they're really the voided and the lost are really reasons that these are not going to happen. That it was a duplicate, lost to a competitor, no response, etc. Okay, so this is intended to give you a feel for reviewing the life cycle from left to right, for related to an estimate. Now I'm going to come back to control. I'll tell you what, while I'm here, I'm going to stay on this one and go down into the orders, so I don't have to keep manipulating, going back and forth.
Paul, we do have two comments
Okay.
that I would like to add in this time. This is
Okay.
from Tom, and it's back to setting up the station names and all.
Okay.
The two comments is this is particularly painful in the station field on an estimate or order. There's only about 20 characters visible, and the field cannot be expanded.
I think that it goes back to what I was alluding to, agreeing with Tom that the more brief and concise in naming the stations.
But this is Tom again. So when you're doing dashboards or you're even in line items, you can sort of expand the station field, and even if you have a long one, you can make it work. If you're actually looking in control at an estimate or an order, right below the status is a little window that has the station name.
Yes.
That field is not expandable. So if you have a long name, there's nothing you can do other than have to drop down into the drop down menu every time you want to see what the station is. So it's much more impact. If you just go to any order or any estimate in your control screen, you'll see that field, and it's as big as it is, and you can't make it any bigger. So there's a real impact of long file names there.
Yeah, we'll look at that when I flip back over, I think, Tom, to point exactly where you're commenting.
Can I make one more comment since I'm on off mute? And that's you showed void and lost. In my opinion, lost is the most appropriate way to to do that, because that helps you with your metrics in terms of win-loss ratios, and and some of the other reports. You can generate the loss, would tell you where you actually lost it. Whereas void, I use void when I've created a duplicate, or for some reason it was a mistake. It's more of a mistake than loss, which is you didn't win the business, or they canceled the project, or something happened for that to go away. But that's my opinion.
That's a good view. My perspective has always been very similar to that, Tom. Lost, in my frame of mind, was used when the customer communicated to you that they weren't going to move forward for whatever reason that you might want to include. Voided, on the other hand, I tended to use and encourage people to use it in the context that you, as the business owner or the manager, or you're making that decision internally because it was an accident, because the customer just absolutely failed to ever respond one way or the other. So rather than keep it as an active estimate that you're working on, you're taking the initiative to shut it down with the voided. So I think my view and your view are very, very similar, but I agree that those two need to be differentiated. I do find in the clients that I work with, unfortunately, that they're using those interchangeably. And by doing that, they're losing the ability to come back after the fact and assess why you're losing business, particularly in the context of the lost. So I agree with you. It's more appropriate from a metrics perspective if you keep those two deliberately distinct, where lost is in the context of the customer making the decision, voided in the context that you as the business owner or the manager are making the decision to shut that estimate down. Good observation.
Well, one last little thing is that we have many times where we can never get a hold of the customer again. They just go completely dark on us. I count that as a loss, because even though we didn't hear back and I'm consciously shutting it down, the customer talked with their feet. They just went away, and so I still treat that as a loss. But that's minor.
That's a minor. It boils down to it's just purely discretionary on how you use those, but use them with a deliberate scope.
As long as you're consistent, it's fine.
Yep. Okay, now what I'm trying to show here, I'm going to try to get this in two different, so you can see in part of the top screen and part of the bottom screen. The top is where we were talking about the estimates, and the line here that you're seeing is coming from if it was converted from an estimate, and it's coming down to become an order. Okay, so now we're making that transition in the life from an estimate to an order. So that's the context of where we are. However, when you're dealing with orders, you're going to have customers that are going to simply call you and say, I need to place an order. So these first 4 steps, so to speak, are pretty much in the context that you're starting from scratch. It was not coming from an order or from an estimate. So you get the request from the customer, you create your template, it's in order, it's in queue, you're working on it, you're gathering the requirements, you're reviewing it with the customer, and now you're ready to begin. Now you're ready to begin the process. If you had come from a conversion, that review and approval in theory would have been done. So now you're entering the life cycle of an order part way through what some of the other processes might have been had you started from scratch. That's what I'm trying to convey. Now here, I'm going from left to right with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stuff, and then I'm continuing the flow down. Now I'm going to go from right to left. So you may, as you're in WIP and it's it's in progress, it's on hold, it's completed. Now you may have some materials to order. So the material's in queue, it's ordered, it's been received. Then it may begin a series of cycles that are related to production, the different production processes. That it might involve printing, where it's in queue, it's in the schedule, it's in progress, it's complete. Then it may also involve some vinyl work, might involve some screening work, might involve some fabrication work. So these are a series of sub-steps, some of which may be used, some of which may not be used, okay? Then after it's finished the production side, then it's going to go into the finishing side, where it's in queue, it's scheduled, it's in progress, it's completed. Then you're coming over to the QA, if you have a QA process, which I think is a good concept. It's a same kind of thing. It's in queue, scheduled, complete, and now it's over in the. Does it need to be voided? You can void it. Primarily you void at the WIP level or the built level. You can void at the sale level. I try to think of that as a last resort to void. Now, as you're coming down here, now the different services that might be involved, if any, different installations requirements, if any, going into the packaging side. So these three primarily are why you're in the built, would be in the built status. And now once you get through all these preliminary steps, if there are some, now you're going to come down where you may have some shipping to deal with, or delivery to pick up to deal with, or that's going to be picked up. Then you come from that side over into the finishing, where you're in the sales status. This is where the ownership of the item goes from you, the business owner, to the customer, and all of the financial ramifications are triggered. So as you get into the wrap-up side here, it's delivered, it's been picked up, it's been shipped, it's been installed, whichever ones apply. And then finally, that it's going to go, once the final payment has been received, then it's going to go to closed, and likely would retain any of the statuses or stations, I'm sorry, from the actual production process. I encourage you, I think, Linda, it was the PDF version of that that's posted on the website. There is an Excel version of that if you would like that. Either send me an email or Linda an email, and I can be glad to provide the Excel sheet for that, so that you can use it as you begin to think through your different processes and how you're working through through the production cycle for the orders, or the processes for estimates. You can kind of define those and either use existing stations for those orders or estimates, or create some of your own, which is what I've tried to illustrate. I've tried to use some that are predefined. I tried to use some that are in the system that had been marked inactive, and then I took the liberty of just adding some that, if I were thinking through this, I may have changed a few of those for my own preferences. Okay, let me close this preview down, and now we're going to come back up to I'm going to change the view back to remote desktop.
We have that small form again. So whatever you did last time, you need to do it again. There it is.
Now is it back full size? Okay.
Yep.
I love my big screen at home. I can have these dumb things side by side so I don't have to scramble around for them. I'm just browsing through my notes just because I think I've jumped ahead, combined a couple of things into one. We've done that. Thing I want to look at next is kind of go where Tom was going with the looking at Explorer. Let's first look at estimates. So if you're changing statuses of estimates or orders, if you're primarily going to use Explorer to do that, and you're likely to have this statuses, you can add the station if it's not already there. You can change the view using the filters, the criteria here. So if you're interested only in only in the pending, then down in the filters, you could get rid of the others that you're not interested in, change the time frame. Okay. So viewing estimates. Now, I think what Tom was alluding to, if you widen this out, these show the combination. So if you're changing the station only within the context of an estimate, you could come up to this one and simply do a right mouse click, come down to change station. And Tom, this is where you're talking, right? You'd have to come down and you see all of these. And some of these names are concatenated. So the pending is concatenated with the specific station that said waiting on artwork. Okay. So I could change the station. I could come down
Tom,
to this.
I unmuted you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Paul.
You see on the Explore screen, you can widen that station name. You're correct. You can't widen drop down. But if you open up one of those estimates.
Okay, I'm opening one.
And you see over on the right-hand side, at the top, it's got status pending, and right below that window that currently says none is a station window. So if you go down there and edit that station and change it to in progress or one of the stations that you've named, you only have the number of characters that show on that screen, in that field, to be visible. You can't stretch that field or change it in any way. So while you can change it through the drop down, if you're just looking at an estimate and you look at that field and there's a really long station name, you won't have any idea which station it's actually in.
Let me open one. I'm intrigued with it because I've never played with that station below the there. I'm going to go to one that's where I've already picked a station.
Yeah. So you see it says pending waiting on art, which in this case is long enough. But if it was pending waiting on art dash, graphic artist 1 or graphic artist 2 or some other additional verbiage, you wouldn't see it. You'd have to go with the click down to even know what station it's in.
Okay, that's a great observation, Tom. I learned something that I didn't notice before.
Again,
I've always looked at it from within the Explorer context, where I'm
and
talking
those fields you can stretch out. But I have some dashboards with an awful lot of columns and space is precious. So even short names there pay off in the long term.
Okay. I don't have a solution for you.
But it's all things you need to think about when you're starting, not after, because you can't change a station name. You can create a new station name, but you can't change a station name and have all that history stay with you.
Okay, I'm making a note to myself.
So if you create something that you don't like later on and you go change that station name, you can't. You have to create a new station name, and all that old station stuff is gone. It's not gone, but it's no longer.
It's not relevant. Yeah, you can probably mark it inactive. Okay, so if we're in Explorer here, we want to change the station. That's it. That's fine. If we want to change the status, you can do it from within Explorer by saying that I'm going to convert it, or I'm going to mark it as lost, or I'm going to mark it as void. So you can do all three of these. If you simply choose convert, it's going to hop right over and create the order, just like you obviously have seen time and time again. If it's going to be lost, then it's going to prompt you for the reason. Ignore that. And now it's going to now it's prompting you for the reason. Okay. And again, this comes back to Tom's suggestion of being very specific and deliberate how you use the lost and the voided for consistency's sake. If I'm going to give a hypothetical case that I would almost guarantee happens. You get into customer, they want to do an estimate. They want you to do an estimate, then there's going to be some design work involved. And they want some of that design work done before they make a commitment to the full order. So it's always a dilemma on how to handle that, for the simple reason that you should likely charge for that design work. But in an estimate, you can't post a payment for that design work. So the dilemma is, how do you deal with that? My thought process, and this is purely my thought process only, but it's one for your consideration. Remember, I alluded to creating a template that you would create for the design work. Have a second estimate, or a second estimate that would be for the entire project, where you continue to gather requirements, et cetera, et cetera. You may or may not have the design line item in that second one as well. But if they give the go ahead to do the design work, then that initial template estimate for the design could be converted to an order. You could accept a payment, post the payment, and can continue to truck on. Now, if the customer ultimately says, no, we're not going to proceed with that project, now by the fact that you've had that estimate as an order, you've received, may or may not have received the payment, you can either void the payment or void the order for the design. You have a number of business choices on how to handle that. If they decide to move forward with the project, now you can either go into the full order and either eliminate the design if you had added it there as well. If they had not paid for the design work in whole, then you can manipulate how you charge for that design in the primary order. And if you had agreed ahead of time that if you're going to charge for the estimate $100, $200, if they just don't go forward, that's what they're going to have paid you for that design work. You may have made a business decision and agreement with them that if they go forward with the project, you would waive the design charges. By separating the design component out, I think it might give you a little bit better vision on how you can handle that likely circumstance of how to handle the design as a kind of prerequisite, for the full order. Again, this is just some of my observations. Down in the order, if we come in and view order, this we're talking now order level. For right now, we're talking order level statuses and stations. Same kind of concept as before. If you're going to simply change the station, that's not the column I wanted. If you want to change the station, just right click, and that's how you can move the order along at the order level by changing the station. We will talk about changing the job group on Thursday. That's somewhat in the context of the mobile app. So you can change the status and the station from within Explorer. I'm looking at something here just a second. You can also look at the Explorer line items. Now here you can do that for at the order level, at the estimate level. If you're at the order level, you can choose which statuses you want to look at. So if you want to look only at the items that are in WIP, now that's what you're seeing. Down in the filters, similar to, you got the time frame that you're looking at. If you're looking at the, so this, it doesn't actually, it shows you the order number, the 1064, and then the line references. So this is line 1, 1A, 1A1. So there was a child and a subchild in there, okay? So if you're going to change the station, station is over here. I'm going to drag this over so we can see them side by side a little bit. Right here, take it one more column. Okay, so this is the status of the parent line item. This is the status of the first child and the status of the second child. So if you want to change that status, you can come in and change the station to in finishing, okay? Missed it. Finger jerk before I. So now that line item is in finishing. So you can change the stations at the order level or the estimate level. And at the order level, you can change it for the entire order or the individual line items. And this will become considerably more apparent when we get into the production mobile app on discussion on Thursday, because there we're going to talk about jobs and job boards and the different groupings and how you can manipulate and view those and move them through the production cycle. You know, from the mobile app. Now I'm looking at the time here. I'm going to close this down. And now I want to kind of wrap things up and talk about the financial impact of estimates and orders. We've talked about the estimates and how they, in theory, don't have any financial impact, but you may have a side issue of how to handle some design work. Order level is where the financial impact occurs. I got here we go. So let's talk about the financial impact of orders. When an order is in WIP, the only financial impact occurs if there was a payment to that order. and that payment will flow to your accounting, either external accounting software, or if you're internally, it'll affect your balance sheet. And in the balance sheet, the payment will be reflected as an asset, and the liability side, the offsetting accounting entry, will affect the customer deposit account on the liability side. So WIP and built money that's been received will have a financial impact. Nothing else is affected from a financial standpoint while it's in WIP or in built. When you get down and mark an order as a sale, you mark an order as a sale, now because the ownership of the finished goods now becomes the owned by the customer, and that shifted from you to the owner. So now the full financial impact is going to take effect, and that's going to affect your balance sheet. On the balance sheet, it's going to affect any payments or accounts receivables changes. It's going to affect your sales taxes. It's going to affect any possibility of customer credits that may have been involved, or any customer deposits. So you got payments and the ARs on the asset side, and you potentially have taxes, customer credits, and customer deposits on the liability side. At the income statement level, the income level, it affects all of the sales accounts, and typically they're going to be broken out in your accounting software. Some of you may not, but it's going to affect all of your sales accounts, any credit memos that have been involved with any order, any finance charges that you had imposed. Those will all be tracked as income and will be reflected in your accounting software if it's external or internal. And on the expense side, if there had been any kind of donation involved or any deliberate decision to write off an order or part of an order, that will get reflected. So everything that could happen to that order from a financial perspective will get reflected when the order becomes a sale. And the closed is the same thing. The only thing that's different between sale and close, which is obvious, is that you've been paid in full, and it no longer will be any order that's in a sale status. It will no longer have any ARs. So it will change, the system will change the status from sale to closed by itself. I think I have covered everything that I wanted to cover. We've got 3 or 4 minutes if there's any additional questions or discussion.
Paul, this is Tom. Couple of comments. One is there is a way to set the initial station on an estimate, an order, and line item, so that as you create an estimate or create an order or create a line item, it starts in a particular station. I don't remember exactly where you set that up, but there's a way to do it and set up somewhere. And that helps because in our overall system, everything is in a station. There's no time that anything you've created isn't in some station or another. And then if you have it default to a start station, then you know at least that's brand new and nothing's happened to it yet. So that's one comment. Second comment is if you get these stations all set up and you're passionate about using them and moving them as things happen, we use them for a lot of triggers for macros. So we send internal emails. We're not brave enough to send things directly to the customer, but it generates an email to the customer that we can then just review, touch up and forward. It sends reminder emails to different people in the organization that some event has taken place, be it the design's finished or all the numbers are all ready to review or things like that. So The stations are very powerful for triggering emails. The other thing is there is a way, and the team at Sirius set this up for me, which is to enable you to populate UDFs with dates when things transition from one station to another. So for example, I have a station that says I've sent the estimate to a customer. So it's estimate in progress sent, or estimate approved sent. And then when I trigger that, move the estimate to that station, it creates a date in a UDF field that is the date that I sent it to the customer. So now I have a dashboard and I can see when I sent them, and that helps me determine on follow-ups or how long it's been hanging around, things like that. So it's really, the stations can really be not only a powerful tool just to know where things are, but act as triggers and enablers for even more data.
Fantastic observations, Tom. I learned some things from you. Quite frankly, I hadn't even thought about the whole process of incorporating the use of stations in the, for dashboards and purposes or for macros. I hadn't even thought of that, but that's a fantastic concept. I think that would be a topic for a separate topic of an extension of what we just talked about today, to take it one more level deeper, one or two levels more deeply in the use of stations.
Yeah, the dashboards are we use, that's how we run the whole business, is off a dashboard. So there's a dashboard for every major grouping. So much like in your flow chart where you've got different departments and things like that, you can create a custom dashboard for each one of those departments that has, the stations, the line items, and all sorts of information in it. UDFs, we have hundreds and hundreds of UDFs. We don't use them all, but we use lots of them. And those are also valuable for populating information in dashboards as well as emails. And I think they're good tutorial videos on the macros and UDF setup and things like that if people haven't used them.
Yeah, I've done kind of an elementary use of macros and queries and dashboards, but I think something like that incorporated with the workflow would be a reasonable suggestion, for another topic, more advanced topic than tying some of those things together. Got a couple more minutes, then I'm going to have to run. Anything else? I was just trying to find real quick, Tom, where you set the station default, but I don't spot it right off the top of my head. So
Yeah.
I'll try to answer that on Thursday and how to do that.
There's a way. We did it so long ago, I can't remember.
Yeah. I've got it written down, and I'll explore that and try to have an answer for everybody on Thursday. Again, I hope this was meaningful and helpful to you. The larger your business becomes, where the more activity there is that's going on, the more important the concept of using the stations to manage your workflow becomes more and more and more important. I think that's really was our objective today, is to maybe scratch the surface from a thinking process. And I would encourage you to, if you want that Excel spreadsheet handout version of it, either let Linda know or myself. Linda has a copy of the Excel version, and I could also respond and send it out. Hope this was helpful. We'll talk to everybody on Thursday.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paul.
Yep, bye-bye.